right, welcome back. We are here with Josh Kanusky, drummer extraordinaire and future podcast personality. Pretty soon he'll start his own show.
Present and future.
He'll start his own show. This is going to kick off to his, where he just talks vintage drums.
Oh, boy.
All day long. And we will be guests on your show.
Do you think anyone will want to listen to that?
I'll listen to it just for your voice.
All right.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I love to just get to know your story with the drums. I feel like, although we don't replicate each other's, past, every drummer has their own journey.
Yeah.
It's really important to just learn how each of us got into it and what we've learned along the way. And just talking about things like this is an easy thing for us to talk about because it's about your life. You lived it. But there's always hidden gems of wisdom in everyone's story.
Wow, I hope
Whether you've been drumming for a little bit or a long time, there's always something that's like, that's a lesson that's better learned the easy way, listening to a podcast rather than the hard way.
Sure.
But yeah, how'd you start? Paint a picture. What was the age? What was the show? The influence? What started you?
Well, my mom is one of 5 kids, and there's a pretty big age difference she's the oldest, between her and her siblings, and I had a lot of great aunts and uncles, but one uncle in particular played the drums. When I was growing up, he was a teenager, and this was like the late 80s, early 90s, and he played drums with a local band and stuff like that, and everybody talked about how great he was. He was like the guy that everybody wanted. So from a young age, there's like pictures of me, 1 year old, like sitting on his drum throne, trying to reach the cymbals, like with my dad with me and stuff. And so drumming has always been a thing in my life. I remember some of the earliest memories are with drums. I've had a drum set at my disposal ever since I could walk, essentially. Fast forward a couple more years, like I learned how to play like a basic rock groove. I really wasn't into lessons, but my uncle was like, hey, if you're going to learn how to play, all you need to do is go in the basement, put the radio on, put some headphones on, and just play along to that.
Yeah.
So in most kids in my neighborhood, which there was a lot, luckily, when they were out running around or in a basement somewhere playing video games, I was in my basement by myself playing. From a really young age, that's just something that I wanted to do. I remember in school, teachers would ask, what do you want to be when you grow up? And my first and only response ever was to be a musician, to be a drummer.
And then they said, you can't be both. You can't grow up
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
Another dad joke. Okay.
So, the high school years I met a couple kids and local kids that played music, and I kind of started, like I said earlier, there was this group of kids that were into like harder rock and metal. And then eventually I found another group of friends that were more into like softer, like singer-songwriter stuff, and I moonlighted between the two. And then I quickly realized that I don't want to be in a band. I want to be in everybody's band. I don't want to just have one project, because I loved playing with different people. I realized very quickly that my growth as a drummer was incredibly faster if I was playing with multiple people as opposed to just playing with one guy down the street, So there was one other drummer who was maybe 2 years younger than me that everybody wanted to play with. And I was really I remember being pretty heartbroken about that when I was like probably 12, 13 years old. And because I'm like, wait, I'm the drummer. I'm the neighborhood guy that plays the drums.
Right, but for whatever reason, he was the go-to.
Yeah, like a bunch of these older cats that were a couple years older, older brothers and stuff, they had a band, and they were calling this guy. And I'm like, well, what does he have that I don't? And I remember them saying to me that this kid just plays the song. He doesn't do anything but just really focuses on the song. And I didn't understand what that meant at the time, but it made me jealous enough to try to improve my own self and my own abilities and my own education to be better, so that I was the guy that everybody
Yeah,
calls.
you got the call, right?
Yeah. So then in like my early 20s, I started going out to open mics. I was really fortunate. There was a lot of open blues jams where I was from. Blues is like a big thing. A lot of like really great musicians, like guys that were on tour with like Sheryl Crow and a bunch of other people. Like, you know, they were already established in their own careers.
Yeah.
They were all guitar players. And I'd go to these jams and they'd say, all right, play a shuffle. Well, I didn't really know what a shuffle was at that point in my life.
Yeah.
So these guys were like, hey, you know, here's a track that you need to learn. Like, play like this. So even though I never had a formal lesson, I've had a lot of opportunities to be in bands and playing in situations where people were like, hey, I want you to play like this. So the only thing I ever wanted was to be a drummer, and in my eyes, the only way for that to happen was to convince people that what I had was what they wanted, you know.
Right.
So I started quickly realized that like you have to play selfless. You have to serve whatever they want in order for me to get a call back, because that was like my main goal, is to just be working.
That's a lesson. That is such a valuable lesson that I still think of all the time. But may I ask, where did you grow up? Where was this?
I grew up in a town called Emmaus, right outside of Allentown, Pennsylvania. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, man, like just to give an analogy, like the music that I was being hired for, they didn't want a Dave Weckl. They wanted, you know, a Jim Keltner.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I quickly realized, I'm like, you know what? Like, these guys, Jim Keltner, Ringo Starr, Levon Helm, you know, Steve Jordan, these guys that are like drummers, in my opinion, aren't your drummers.
Right.
You know, like as far as flashy, they're not a Dave Weckl or a Vinnie Colaiuta.
Yeah. They're
Like
make
a
the
working
pocket
man.
feel as good as you
Exactly.
can.
They're song players, you know.
That's it.
And so I realized, well, maybe that's a direction, you know, that I need to be going in, because I obviously don't play like a Dave Weckl or a Vinnie Colaiuta. So I kind of picked this lane, and ever since I've really tried to be the best at that I possibly can be, and as opposed to trying just to
Be the star of the show.
be an Instagram drummer,
Yeah.
which there's
Yeah.
a time and place for
Yeah,
that.
sure.
But man, I'm telling you, every artist that I've ever been on tour or had been in a studio with, if I pulled that you know, Instagram drummer thing on their session or their show,
Ain't happening.
yeah, I would have
It's-
never gotten called back.
It's kind of like the old story of Elvis coming in, and his drummer had the Vista lights on stage, and he's like,
Yeah.
get him out of here.
Yeah.
It's not about you. You're not the
Yeah.
star of the show.
Yeah, I love playing music. I get so much out of playing music and being a part of an ensemble, a band, a show. It's so important to me that I will sacrifice my own creativity sometimes, a lot of times, in order just to be in that seat. And there's a point where if you're playing multiple gigs or multiple projects, that's really a nice thing, because if I'm not, like, let's say I'm doing a gig down the street here at a restaurant, I'm just backup music, you know, background music. I'm playing quietly just to give people something to listen to. But then I know in a couple more nights, like, I'll be able to be on another gig where I can kind of let loose a little bit in more of a louder situation. So I save all that stuff for that gig, you know.
Right.
Like, I think of it that way.
Well, it's a huge thing. It's really important for drummers to have not only self-awareness, but like gig awareness.
Oh yeah.
You know, it's a huge thing that you kind of build up. And starting out, I had zero intuition. There was no reading of the room. It was like, well, this is what we do.
Yeah.
So we're going to go there and do this because this is all I know how to do.
Yeah.
Right? But once you start to develop the skill set or just the awareness of what's going on, analyzing it, and then what works best in this situation and acting upon it, that's when you'd really start to be called back. People want to play with you.
You want to be a working musician, and if work that night is at a local restaurant, you know, and people are paying you to play music, which is like, for me, that's the ultimate. You know what I mean? Like, this is something I'm so passionate
Absolutely.
about. It's a religion. It's the only religion that I actually give a rat's, about. If someone is willing to pay me to show up and play my instrument and feel absolute joy, the least I could do is follow their rules. If they're not wanting anything loud, that's the least I could do is play quiet,
Yeah.
because I want to call back. I want to continue to work for that person. If you had your own business, let's say we were painters and we showed up and the customer asks us to paint these walls white, and we come in here and we're like, you know what? We're pretty, intelligent guys and we're artistic. So we're going to paint all these walls yellow because we think that that's the way it should be.
Yep.
You're never going to get hired again to do another painting job. And
Absolutely.
I think music is a lot like that, or at least in my opinion.
Well, when you are working with someone, there is a time and place for that. If you're in an original band and you guys are
Oh, yeah.
writing songs, then you can say, you know what, this room, if Adam and I were like, hey, let's talk about redoing this, and you're like, I'm going to do this white, I could make that suggestion. Go, you know what, man, it would really look nice with a brick wall here.
Yeah.
Ultimately, it's whatever, but there's a time and place where you can make that suggestion, like, hey, after the bridge, why don't we, do this, and then I'll come in with this, But if it's someone else's music, yeah, you want to serve that song.
Oh,
Absolutely.
yeah. And you want to let, another thing that I've always been conscious of, is instead of me being like, okay, we're in a studio, here's the song that we're about to record. As soon as the guitar player starts strumming, last thing I do is start playing. What I want to do is I want to feel, I want to hear, and experience what that artist is bringing to the table, and that will dictate what I need to be playing.
Yeah.
As opposed to being like, I feel this tempo, and then just start playing. Playing what I think should be there and what should be there are two different things.
Yeah.
And as drummers, I think that, man, we are just so excited to play our instrument because it's so much fun.
Absolutely.
And sometimes we just have to take a back seat and then think, okay, I want to serve this person. I want to serve this job. I want to serve this song as best as I possibly can. And just take a step back, take a breath, figure out, what this story is about, what this looks like. Even though it's sound, think about what it looks like, and then and let that dictate to you your contribution, as opposed to just being like, oh man, on the way here I was just listening to Vinnie Colaiuta play with Sting, and whatever the song is, I'm going to play exactly, those kinds of chops. And it's just like, well, that doesn't.
It's awareness, and then it's an incredible amount of listening that can take place.
Oh, absolutely.
If you can't vibe with the song, if you can't feel it, and it's a rehearsal setting, obviously, like in this situation, or someone sends you tracks, or whatever the situation is, a demo. If you're not quite sure, rather than jumping on, I think nowadays we were talking a little bit about like the impatience and with different scenarios, but it's just one of those things. Instead of texting them back right away after you only listen to the demo once through on your opinion, like, I don't think this is going to work, I don't vibe, but listen again.
Oh, let me tell you something. My first audition for like a real big touring group, I almost missed out on it because of that. I won't say the band name, but I made a huge mistake. I almost made a huge mistake, which would have changed the whole trajectory of my career. I got an email to do an audition. I listened to the artist, and I really wasn't blown away by it. And it was something different than what I had envisioned.
Yeah.
And I go to band practice that night. My guitarist is like, "Hey, what's going on with the gig search? How's that going for you?" I said, "It's this band. They want to have, I got an email, and I listened to their music, and they want to do an audition. But I'm not going to do it." And my guitar player, he's like, "Why?" And I'm like, "It's just not really my thing." And he's like, "You are an idiot." He's like, "How do you know that? You've never even met these people. You don't know what they're all about. Like, you can't judge it just by going on 3 minutes. You know,
Exactly.
you have to really, you give it a chance. And even if it's not the right situation, you show up. You do your absolute best, because even if that situation doesn't work out, you're going to learn something from that you can take on to the next chapter of your life or the next opportunity. You know, yeah. I came really close to not getting an audition, or not taking advantage of an audition.
Was it your guitar player and he convinced you to go back and take a second listen then? And then what happened?
Well, he said, his exact words, I won't say any names, but he's like, "You're an idiot. This person plays with this person. And
Right.
if this person gets you, and you're going to get the gig,
Yeah.
and then this person's going to hear you, and they're going to want you for their gig."
It's like seeing
And
the
I was
forest.
just like, oh, okay. And that's exactly what happened.
Oh my God.
That's how I got into touring, you know. That's exactly,
Yeah.
thank goodness. And I thank my buddy every time I'm on the
Nice.
road. I'll call him up, be like, "Man, this is all because of you." You know,
Yeah.
like every time he comes to one of our shows, you know, I always meet him before the show, and I'm like, "Hey, man, you know, like, I wouldn't have had this life
Yeah.
without
Yeah.
the knowledge of, hey, take advantage of that opportunity," you know, because I was so, at that time, all I wanted to do is play like the Allman Brothers, you know,
Yeah.
and this was not the Allman Brothers at the time, you know.
So let's bridge the gap. So we talked about your realization that you need to focus on
Yeah.
the song and like, why is this kid getting gigs over me?
Yeah.
And then you eventually get this opportunity to audition. In between there, how much was it just woodshed?
At that point in my life, I had already done the woodshedding.
Okay.
Because
You were ready.
I was ready, at least as far as my ability at that point in my life.
Right.
Then comes a whole nother thing where it's just like, okay, you have to learn how to be on the road, how to tackle with the ups and downs of being a professional musician. You have to, when you're on the road, if I can describe, I'll try to do it quickly. When you're on the road playing every night, a typical day is you wake up in the morning, you travel for hours, 6 hours some days, to get to the next town. You get there, you load in, you do a sound check, you eat dinner, you do a show, you load the truck back up, and you're off to the hotel for a couple hours, and then you do it all over again. But that hour and a half to 2-3 hours of playing every night, it's just everything. It's what you're working for. It's what you're away from your family for. It's just that enjoyment, that couple hours a night is the goal. But when you come home from that, you're on such a natural high because of these things. And when you come home from that, it's an absolute drag because you're just living this amazing life. But when you get home, you're by yourself.
You're like restless, probably.
Yeah,
It's
because
like,
all you want to do is get back out and feel that energy and feel that, the good vibration, and so a big thing that took at least 2 years when I first started doing this was learning how to handle the ups and downs. Being on a peak is a lot of fun, but you have to learn how to be in that valley too.
Right.
It's not an easy thing, and it took me a long time to realize, okay, well, getting off a tour when I'm home for a couple weeks, does that mean I'm not a musician anymore? Does that mean I don't have to play or practice or listen? You have to figure out, and that's it was a hard thing for me, to juggle the ups and downs of it. That's probably the hardest thing, and making sure your taxes are paid.
Well, there you go.
yes.
You know what I mean?
Always
so many
hard,
musicians
yes.
have that problem too,
Absolutely.
I suppose.
Well, is there anything that you found helpful, extremely
Yeah.
helpful with dealing with that?
Yeah.
Just for any other musicians that are going through that or
Yeah,
will?
try to juggle that the best you can. One thing that I learned is when you're on the road, you're an ambassador to yourself, to your family, to your community, to your friends, to your other friends that are musicians. I mean, how many guys do we all know that are just amazing musicians? Guitar players, keyboardists. and a very few of them are making their living as a musician, as a
Right.
touring musician, as a recording musician. When when you're in that role of a professional musician, what we consider a professional musician, I'm not only doing it for myself. I'm doing it for my community. You are an ambassador, because there's so many other guys that are perfectly capable of doing this job, but you're the guy or gal that gets to do it. I used to be a construction worker before I started doing this. After high school, I started doing construction.
Okay.
And for about 10 years, I hated going to work. And then when I ultimately decided that I was done with that and I really wanted to try to get music going, it took a long time. First couple years, I didn't make any money, and I had to move back home with my parents, which was, thank God for them. But it wasn't an easy thing. Being a young adult, living on your own for a while, and then having to move back in, it's a tough thing, but it's the only thing that I could do in order to have a roof over my head. I was essentially homeless, and but thank God for great parents.
Of course.
And so that was a dark time where you're not feeling that great about your own self. But you
Right.
get through that, and because you go through that dark time, you become better, at what you do, and you have a better appreciation. And I'll be honest, there wasn't a construction site that I passed that I didn't feel fortunate. When you're driving down the highway and there's a bunch of people working on the side of the road,
Sure.
and you're looking out that window and you're like, that's me, like that's
Yep.
that's me. That could be me if I didn't just devote all this time to something that I absolutely love, like willingly. No one's ever forced me to do this kind of stuff. But being humble is something that is really, I think, is really important in doing these kinds of things, because the reason that those people are working are exactly the reason why I'm here.
That's it.
Being able to do what I absolutely love, and
Yeah.
and as much as those people are changing lives for their community as well, what they're building, what their contribution, I really feel that musicians are really relevant too. I think as artistic people, sometimes we stress in our own selves about how we might not feel like good enough, or we have a bad gig, or we have a bad rehearsal, and then the next couple of days you're just down because you're like, man, like I just don't feel good about where I'm at. Just know that those things are normal, and they will eventually, if you keep going, they will persist into getting where you need to be. But just try not to doubt yourself, and if playing music is your calling, and there's no other option, if this is where you're supposed to be, just do it. Do it with an open mind and an open heart, and try to be respectful of everyone you come in contact with. Like that respect thing. You show up to a gig. I've actually listened to Rick say this exact thing.
Yeah.
You show up to a gig, you shake everybody's hand, you
Right.
introduce yourself. Hey, I'm Josh. Thanks so much for having me, because you're essentially coming into their home, their theater, their restaurant, their club, whatever it may be. Like I said, you have to be an ambassador to yourself, to your loved ones, to everyone that made you who you are, and to show that kindness to other folks around you that are the only reason that you're there in the first place, is because you're all working together to make a show happen, or,
Yeah.
or a record or something, whatever the end result
Absolutely.
is. Yeah.
Yeah. That's
I think
awesome.
that there's such a common thread to guys who do it like you do it, like actually take it seriously, and that is the humble factor and the respect factor. That's such a common thread where, I meet a lot of musicians that tour, that play professionally, and that is their business, and they have that same common thread that you do. So it's not by accident. It's those are the things that you need to do because you're dealing with a lot of people. And I never
Yeah.
heard the ambassador part, but I'm like, my God, you're
That's
right.
it. That's
You're an ambassador for your band, your
Yeah.
family, everything.
Yeah.
And that all that little bit, what Rick said too about like saying thank you goes a long
Yeah.
way.
I have guys that I grew up with that are just incredible musicians, and for one reason or another, whether it be family or just personal reasons or anything, they could totally be touring musicians or recording artists, but for one reason or another, they didn't choose that path. When I started touring and recording for a living, it was a mission in my head that whenever I show up to a gig, a session, anything, I'm not doing it just for myself. I'm doing it for everyone that I love, all my buddies that don't have this opportunity to do this. It's like, and I remind them often, I got
Yeah.
a couple of good buddies that I grew up with that play, and I'll often call them and, like I do with my buddy that, that helped me realize
Yeah.
that this was a good
Yeah.
opportunity to have an audition. I'll call them from the road and just say, hey man, I'm trying to do this for both of us,
Yeah.
and your contribution to me and my knowledge of music and how we woodshedded together for
Yeah.
years, that's what got me to where I'm at.
Yeah, that's a beautiful perspective,
Yeah.
and it's so important. I'm glad that we're talking about this, and also that you reach out to them, because negativity and complaining is so loud and so present with everyone, and it's easy to fall into those tracks. But then you hear something like that, and it's so refreshing, and that I don't even need to talk to them. I know that means the world to them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One thing I love about watching you guys and your videos is it's always positive, and the openness about it. I've heard you say, plenty of times about don't hate this, just love the fact that you have this opportunity.
Absolutely.
That's exactly what this is all about. We are given, this is a gift, this, for one reason or another, the reason that we're into music or into drums or collecting, working, anything music related, those interests are a gift. And if we're careless with that gift, what does it get you? It probably won't get you very far, So having a positive attitude with it is it creates a positive feedback. If someone comes into the shop and you're unkind to them, well, they're not going to want to come back. But the kindness that I see you guys have towards your customers and creates not only a loyal following, but it creates a safe space for everyone that comes into this environment to feel confident in, automatically feel confident, which is a real, and I've always felt that way, coming into the shop, even at the old location too. It's a good thing.
That's rule number one. This isn't like some exclusive,
Yeah.
Oh, you have to be up here, or you have to meet certain criteria. It's like there's a positive energy that you get when you do encourage someone to say, oh no, like someone might be having some issues. I was just talking to a guy about his pedal, and he wasn't sure if it was his pedal or if his technique wasn't quite there. I said, we'll figure it out together, dude.
Yeah.
I'll mess with your pedal, and
Yeah.
when you come in, we'll go show me what you're trying to do, and maybe that's where lessons come in. That's where the pedal's fine. You just need to work on that a little bit more, and you'll get it.
Yeah.
So it's just encouraging, not like, dude, just practice. Like, what are you doing? It's like,
Yeah.
or like, there's nothing wrong with your pedal. What's wrong with
Yeah.
Like, you can't say that.
Yeah.
You don't want to say that either.
Yeah. I another quick story,
Yeah, go ahead.
which might not be that quick.
We've got time.
When I was doing construction in my early 20s, I stopped playing for a while just because it just wasn't, I don't know, I just was not playing essentially. And I wound up working at a famous drummer's house. Unbeknownst to me, it was I just showed up the one day, and this older couple, we were finishing their basement, and he had a Mike Portnoy T-shirt, Dream Theater drummer, old Dream Theater drummer,
Yeah.
original, and I saw the guy and I thought, well, that's kind of interesting because like, how does this guy know who Mike Portnoy is, and why is he listening to Dream Theater?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
and so after a couple days of working at their house, I went up to him and I said, hey, what's the connection with this Dream Theater and you? Because he's wearing these shirts every day.
Yeah.
And he goes, oh, my daughter's married to their drummer. And I was like, you got to be kidding me. Like,
Wow.
that's incredible. And he's like, yeah, he lives like right a
He
couple
lives in
hou-
Allentown, right?
yeah, right outside of
Okay.
Allentown, you know. And he's like, he's on tour right now, but he'll be back in a couple days. Do you want to meet him? I'm like, yeah, I want to meet the, you know.
Yeah.
I grew up Modern Drummer magazine, like he's on the cover.
There
you know
he
what
is.
I'm saying? Like,
Yep.
this guy is like one of the greatest
Absolutely,
drummers
yeah.
of
Yeah.
you know, of the generation.
Yep.
And at that time, I wasn't playing. And a couple days later, I come in early in the morning, and there he is with his family, and they're all sitting at Grandma and Grandpa's house, you know, like the house I'm working on. And there's Mike Portnoy, and he's like, "Hey, Josh, how's it going? I hear you play drums." And I was just like, "What in the world?" Because I had never
Yeah,
met
neat.
anybody famous before, let alone a famous musician.
Yeah.
And that moment changed my life. He could not have been more nice to me, you know, and encouraging. And he's like, "Hey, on your lunch break, let's go up to my house. I'll show you my studio." Okay, cool, man. And I get up there, and do you know that white and purple Tama kit that he
Absolutely.
had? That was
Absolutely.
set up in the basement in his studio.
Wow.
And he has tons of other, you know, drums and cymbals and, you know, all of his modern drummer covers and top 100, you know, 100 top drummers in the world. Like, you know, he has those articles just in frames. So anyway, so I have to say thank you to, you know, to Mike Portnoy too, because he jump started me. And I honestly thought in that moment, I'm like, wow, if this guy can do it, like anybody can do this. Not saying that the time and effort and his talents aren't valid, because they absolutely are. But it made me realize that these are just normal people with an extraordinary talent that have been given an extraordinary opportunity. But they're just like everybody else, you know. This is what they do. This is the opportunity, and this is where they went with it, you know. And it made me realize, like, what am I doing? If this is really what I want to do,
Yep.
I should be focusing on that. You know, set a goal, and make that happen for yourself. You know, yeah,
That's awesome, man.
yeah,
That's so
That
cool.
is that. I'm so glad you shared that story. I mean, we spent so many out. I've seen all of his drumming DVDs.
Oh, me
and,
too.
and everything else,
Yeah.
especially at the shop, just playing all the time.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, new Mike Portnoy DVD. Break
Yeah.
it out, throw it in. We tried to get him for a clinic.
Oh, really?
Too, yeah. But you know, when you do that, you can't, like, because I knew he was as close as he
Oh,
is.
yeah.
He's in Allentown. He
Yeah.
can just pop on down.
Yeah.
But when you are endorsed
Yeah.
and things like that, you can't just do that. Like, you have to go through the companies. They have to make
Yeah.
the deals. You have to, you know, that kind of stuff. So there's a lot more involved than just saying, "Hey, come on down." Not that we haven't done that with guys.
Yeah.
Like, but with that level, that's like next level stuff.
Oh, he's definitely a sweetheart of a guy. It's funny because years after that, I saw him in grocery store, because I used to live up that way. And I'd see him in the grocery store, and I'd say to my wife, "You see that guy? That guy's like a really, really famous drummer."
He's a rock star.
Yeah, and she's like, "Well, why don't you go talk to him?"
Yeah.
I'm like, "No, that's okay."
Right.
I recently just did a record. I was up in the studio, and the engineer is also a drummer and a producer. We were talking, and I told him this Mike Portnoy story. He's like, "That's crazy." He's like, "I teach at this drum shop up in Bethlehem, California drum shop," and he's like, "I had his son, Max, I think his name is." He's like, "I've been teaching Max since he was a little boy. I'm his drum instructor."
Wow.
And he's like, "I'm going to tell Mike, the next time I see him, I'm going to tell him your story." And I'm like,
Yeah.
"Well, tell him thanks, you know, like, thanks for, like, being such a wonderful human, you know, and turning me on to wanting to do this more too, you know."
Now, when he took you to his drum room,
Yeah.
did you play?
I did not.
Okay.
No.
Because that would be something too. Like, I'm like, I would want to, just
Yeah.
because, like, I just, like, but what am I gonna do?
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
Oh yeah, my
good?
wrist has been acting
Yeah.
up lately.
did
Yeah.
he play, or he just showed you his?
No, it was like as
Cool.
big as a house, like this
Yeah,
basement.
yeah.
It was fully there was multiple rooms of drums.
Can I go boom boom bap on your big monster Octoplus drum set, please?
Yeah.
No, I prefer a double pedal. These 2 kick drums, I won't embarrass myself.
Yeah, he couldn't have been cooler, man.
I think one of my favorite times seeing it, like, because he's so synonymous with like all of the drums and progressive music and everything else like that. On I think his first DVD, Liquid Drum
Theater, maybe?
Liquid
Something
Drum
like-
Theater, I think it
yeah,
was.
something like that.
Experiment,
Yes,
maybe.
Experiment, yeah.
Is that what it was?
yeah.
Liquid Drum Experiment, okay?
Yeah.
He plays like the bass, his rack tom is a timbali, and he has a hang-in mounted floor tom, and he plays this little set, and he's going over some really cool stuff. Some things that like I still like the double between the eighth note kind of
Yeah.
thing, like almost sounded like double bass. I still do,
Yeah.
today. I think that was my favorite time seeing him play, is like playing that little set.
Yeah.
It's so cool.
Yeah, man. Yeah, he's a good dude. That's what got me back into, wanting to be a musician. It's
Yeah.
like just meeting him and being like, wow, there's actually people out here.
Yeah.
They're not just like hero,
Nope.
they're not superheroes. They're not cartoons. They're actually real
And
humans.
he didn't have an attitude now. He goes
Oh
back
my
to that.
God.
He's humble.
Oh, yeah, he was totally cool.
Sure, he has all his awards up everywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you're
stuff
just
that.
like, interesting. So he's still buying whole milk, huh?
Right. He does his own grocery shopping.
Interesting.
He doesn't
Yeah.
have someone tie his shoes in the morning for him.
Exactly.
Yeah, I maybe I should have gone up to him, but that's just not really
Nah,
who I am.
yeah.
But I
gotta
definitely
do you.
would see him, and I'm just like, that's that guy.
That's
you know?
so cool.
Yeah.
All right, we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about your drums.
Okay. Cool.
Let's talk about drums.
Which one do you want to know about?
This is the problem.
Yeah.
You have a lot of drums. That's
Yeah.
not a problem.
Yeah.
It's not a problem. It's a
Not
very
for
good
me.
thing.
It's not.
No. It's not. It's okay by us.
Yeah.
No, but I talked to Christy. She taught yesterday.
Okay.
And I mentioned that you were coming on, and she told me that it's always a joy playing with you, but she said she had a gig with you and you were bringing the kit, and
Yeah.
she's like, I text him just to be like, hey, what should I bring? And he's like, nah, I got you covered or whatever, and sends me pictures and says, which one?
Yeah.
And it was like all these options, and then or which kit do you want to play, And then she picked one. You're like, all right, which sizes? And he's like, do you want to play the 22 bass drum or the 20? I have the matching, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And a 12 rack, 13, a 10. What do you want? Like,
Yeah.
what a guy.
Well,
what a guy. I
we-
mean, that's the dream.
I forget what gig it was on, but I was playing in a band at Zootropolis in Lancaster here. And it was a co-bill. It was the artist that I was working with, and then an artist that she was working with. I forget. I'm terrible at band names.
Yeah.
And sometimes I'm pretty hesitant to like share my drums. It's a part of me. These are
Yeah,
things
a
that I've
little
had
bit. Yeah,
for a
of course.
long time, and I just don't want to bash her. But the guy I was working for, he's like, don't worry, this other band is real legit. Like, you don't have to worry about, okay, cool. So I said, hey, just give their drummer my number and have them call me, because I want to make sure that they have what they want, And sure enough, she called, and I said, I showed her a bunch of pictures, and I'm like, listen, you just tell me out of all this stuff what you want me to bring, because I can play it all. I love playing it all, And you choose whatever you want out of my arsenal of what I have, and then she's like, oh, I really like this one, and she's like, wait a second. She's like, is that pink champagne? Champagne sparkle. I'm like, yeah. She goes, oh, I want that one. It's gonna match my dress. I'm like, all right,
Nice.
you got
Perfect.
it. Yeah, it worked out pretty well.
What was it? Pink champagne. What was it?
I think that might have been a 2012, 14, like a 19. That's a 1967 Ludwig.
Oh, nice.
Yeah,
Cool.
that's a great sounding kit.
Yeah.
Yeah, I started when I was, I bet 22 years old. A guy that I knew in high school called me. I never had. I didn't come from money. Like I grew up in like a really middle to lower class, working class family, and we worked hard for what we had. And a couple years after high school, I got a call from a guy I went to high school with, and he's like, "Hey, we're clearing out my grandmother's house, and she's got this drum set. Do you want it? Give me $50 for it."
Okay.
And I was like, I'll be right there. So I
All right.
hopped in my
Yeah.
van, went over to that house across the street, in town there. And it was like a mid-70s blue Vista Light, concert toms, like all different sizes. And I was like, wow, well, here you go. And it came with all the hardware and a bunch of old Zildjian cymbals.
Is that what
Yeah.
started the
Yeah.
collecting?
So that night, I took everything apart, cleaned every little
Yeah.
piece, put it all back together, got all new heads. I kept the cymbals for a long time. I still have a couple of the cymbals. And I sold the drum set. I was like, I'm probably not going to want a Vistalite. It's not my thing. I sold the Vistalite. And then I bought another kit, which was like a 68 Champagne Sparkle. And then I bought a bunch more. I sold a bunch more, and it's always been. I absolutely. Not only do I love these drums, taking them apart. I love buying an entire drum set of like, hey, my grandpa's got this. Okay, I'll be right over. I'll buy it sight unseen, because more or less there's going to be something in that drum set that I absolutely fall in love with. Whether it's a little drum key, or a little note with all the songs from a gig or something like that, or little tools that a guy 50 years ago was using on his drums. It's old drum heads, just seeing scribbles written on the drum heads. Or I just got a drum this past year, and I opened it up. It was like a mid 50s WFL White Marine Pearl tom, 13x9, I guess that would be. And I opened it up, and there was a note written in the inside of this drum. It was the kid's name. It said 1957 Christmas present, and it had his address. It was like right in Reading.
Amazing.
And I thought, man, someone took the time to open up this drum before Christmas morning, wrote this little thing in it, and then put it back together. And this thing, it still had the original heads on it.
Yeah.
So I'm like, this thing has not been seen, in 50 plus years. And I'm
That's
like,
amazing. Drums have stories, man. They all carry their own story with them.
I just bought, my most recent purchase was I cruise around on Marketplace all the time, multiple times a day, just to find drums, old drums. And
You're the one taking all the good deals.
He's the guy stealing all
the
the-
heck.
if you want to come over, we'll enjoy them together.
Yeah, absolutely.
We I saw this guy was selling. He thought it was an '80s Premiere, but I knew right away it wasn't '80s era. And I called him up. I said, "Listen, I'll take it. I'll be right over to get it." Okay, cool. I go pick it up. It's this beautiful mid '50s Premiere kit, an absolute like gorgeous showroom like condition.
Yeah.
Matching hardware, period correct, and a set of old Zildjian A cymbals from the mid '50s. And
Wow.
I looked at them, and I was just like, "Yeah, man, I'll take it." Gave him the cash. I took it home. I immediately like started taking it all apart, cleaning everything, and it had calfskin heads on it, and it's just an absolute monster of a beauty. And I just played that up at the Beacon Theater in New York City last weekend.
That truly is one of my favorite things about this job. And, I do a lot of things around here, but I love to get new used gear in.
Yeah.
And I've been doing it for so long that, like, I can evaluate things pretty quickly as well. And I always call it the diamond in the rough. Like, okay, this might be like a CB set. Oh, but there's a nice Zildjian there that makes it all the worthwhile here.
Absolutely.
Okay,
Yeah.
So I love doing that. And just recently we got that Ludwig Black Oyster Pearl from 1970 in, and it came in, and it was dirty, but it was still in good shape. But I couldn't wait to get this thing apart because I knew it was going to shine up real nice and clean up. But I got so sidetracked with like work and orders and price updating and merchandise, everything else, and I just had to set that thing aside. But I just couldn't wait to get that thing all together because the final project is that sitting there. And it's beautiful and it's all together. And it had all the correct hardware with it. It was just like I couldn't wait to just get that thing. Yeah,
man. I love that kind of stuff. Just opening up a bass drum and having it like a blanket or the smell of it. I have that first Vistalite drum kit that I had bought. There was a quilt in there that someone had made. And I still have that quilt. It was my daughter's baby blanket that we used for her. It's like, I still have it. It's still in our house, 20-some years ago,
Yeah, sometimes we'll find some real gnarly stuff in the bass room, like old damp pillow. There's some funny stuff.
One of my favorite cymbals that I own, it's like probably late 50s, maybe early 60s. It's a Zildjian A 18 crash I bought from you guys at your old location. I remember like walking in and I was always scalping like because you guys always have your used stuff at an amazing price. I always like, I love coming in here to see your cymbal collection because it's just like every cymbal is, if I love it, I know I'll get it,
Yep.
you know? And my favorite crash cymbal I own is like a late 50s. And I think it may have been sitting in a window with
Okay.
like the kit the old kit, you know, Leedies or whatever it may be,
Yeah.
in the window. And I think I talked to you and I'm like, hey Sean, is this cymbal for sale? And you're like, nah, it's for display. And I'm like, damn, because if it was, I'd definitely buy it today because it's just like an
all you need
amazing,
to
Dude,
say.
that's all you need to
it's
say.
an amazing
I'm sorry.
sounding cymbal. And then you're like, well, I think it might have been Rick's. You're like, let me go check. And
Yeah.
I think you talked to Rick, and Rick's like $100. And you came back and you're like $100. I'm like, all day long.
Right.
Oh my God, I love that cymbal. It's the best sounding crash cymbal I've ever heard.
I remember this, and
Yeah.
it's funny because he had a couple of display like kits
Yeah.
around that weren't for sale. Eventually, I mean everything has a price. Everybody
Yeah.
has a price, but I remember you asking me that, and I'm like, well, I don't want to just sell this thing, and
Yeah.
like then he's like, hey, what the heck? So I wanted to check, and I said, dude,
Yeah.
I want to like hook this guy up. Like
Oh,
this
man.
guy. I love this guy. He's super cool. He's the guy that rents the hardware. I probably say it all the time. You're wondering what happened to the hardware. So who rents? I remember him asking me, he's like, who rents just the hardware? I was like, this
Yeah.
guy's on tour.
Yeah.
So he's scratching his head. I'm like, don't worry, it's fine, because he would get nervous. Like
Okay.
when a set would go out for a long time.
Oh, I bet.
Because we're used to renting like for a festival here, like just
Or a
that kind
gig.
of thing.
One night.
This thing is gone. This thing's
Yeah.
They went to California, to Nevada, to all the way around. So he would get nervous. I'm like, dude, this guy is a sweetheart. He's the nicest guy you'd ever want to meet. He's totally cool. So I remember going to him. It's like, I want to sell this cymbal to this guy. I want to hook this guy up. He wants it. He's like, do it. So,
Oh,
okay.
I love that cymbal.
Cool.
That cymbal. So when I went before a gig, I'll think to myself, okay, what does the room look like? What does it sound like? What kind of music are we playing? That cymbal always comes.
Nice.
It's always the cymbal that comes with me. No matter what else is with it, that's the cymbal. I can use it for a ride. You know, it's a great crash. It's on every recording. If you've ever hear a recording of me in the past, 5 years maybe?
Yeah, probably. What
That-
year's 23? Yeah,
Yeah.
that could have been.
That
Yeah,
that
please.
symbol is on that recording.
That's freaking cool. I'm
Yeah.
so glad. That makes me happy.
Oh, me too. Every time I look at it, it makes
Awesome.
me happy.
Well, you mentioned your daughter.
Yeah.
Are there any feelings towards the drums yet?
Oh, totally.
Okay.
Every morning we start the day. We'll wake up. I'll do breakfast. I usually cook breakfast for the family, and then her and I, more than less, every day we'll go up to the studio, and I'll get behind the drums, and she has a microphone. I'll plug into the PA,
Oh yeah.
and we put the radio on, and
Wow.
she sings and dances, and I'll play along a little bit. Just keep my chops going a little bit.
Absolutely.
Yeah, she loves playing. She loves everything music. She's 3.5. We'll just be sitting anywhere and she'll start singing Beatles songs. I want to hold your hand. I'm like, yeah. I'm like, where'd you hear that song? She's like, come on, Dad, it's the Beatles. I'm like,
What?
Okay.
What?
I'm not even kidding.
That's amazing.
Yeah, she's got some good taste in music.
That's very cool. I'm sure you and your wife had nothing to do with that. So.
We listen to music all the time. Music is always playing in our house.
great.
From when we wake up to when we go to bed, there's music on. Anything Aretha Franklin or Ray Charles, the Beatles, like 80s pop music, like anything.
Mhm.
Yeah, we're always listening to music.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, is there anything, I like to ask this, is there anything we didn't talk about today as
Oh,
far as
man.
industry stuff, gear stuff? We could talk all day long, I know, but
Yeah.
is there anything that he mentioned, Sean, that
Yeah.
you
Well,
caught on to?
yeah, there was
Please.
something. Now, just recently you had ended. We didn't talk about you ending your stint with
The David Bromberg. thing.
David Bromberg.
Yeah.
How long have you played with him?
I've been with him since just about 2010, 11.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, is he not playing anymore? Is that what's
Yep,
going
he
on?
retired.
Okay.
So yeah, we've done, over 10 years of touring together, and usually a year of touring would be us being out probably at least like anywhere between 100 and or 80 or 120 dates a year, depending on obviously on the year or whatever. Yeah, we've done 3 studio records together, traveled all over the world, and yeah.
Because I had seen that you would put something out, like I follow you on Instagram, and you were like, "Well, I'm gonna have some free time on my hands." So, and I know you're pretty handy, you know, because I've seen you fixing up your house and doing different things. So I'm like, "Wow, this guy is freaking crazy talented, man!"
Thanks.
It's
man.
freaking awesome.
Yeah, man. I've always would rather be playing music than anything else, obviously. But another thing, I tell you what, man. We're talking about professional musicians.
Mm-hmm.
I know so many professional musicians that when they're done with a tour, they go right back to a day job. And it just because you have to do that doesn't mean that you're any less of a musician.
Oh, absolutely.
That's one thing that I struggled with in the beginning, was like a self-identity. Just because you play some gigs, does that mean you're a musician? And then once you are playing gigs and that's your income, for your livelihood, you play tricks on yourself. You doubt yourself. Am I a musician? What makes a musician? Okay, well, like, am I worthy of calling?
All those questions.
Am I worthy enough of calling myself a musician? And the short answer is yes. If that's what you want to do, then just do it. Like, if that's what your calling is, then might as well. And even if you're not making your living as a musician, call yourself a musician anyway. If that's what makes you happy,
just say it until it actually happens.
Yeah, because most times when people are like, "Oh, hi, Josh. Like, what do you do for a living?" I don't even want to tell them because, like, I don't know. I'm not one to
People
boast.
have a stigma too about that.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Sex, drugs, and rock and roll.
Right.
Well, that just doesn't exist in my world.
Right.
Yeah, and how boring it is on, if someone outside was looking in to see how boring my life actually is on the road, they'd be like, well, what the hell? It's none of the above.
Not what I expected.
Yeah, man. You're in a van with a bunch of dudes for the majority of a day, and you get out of the van for a couple hours to play some music, and then you're back in that van or bus or airplane or wherever.
Yeah, we were talking to Tom Wiersbicky last week, and he mentioned that too. Where
Carl.
His cousin's name is Tom.
Cousin's name Tom.
Yeah, Tom.
Yeah.
He's also a drummer too. Big shout out to him. So yeah, Tom, So Carl Wiersbicky. Anyway, he had mentioned that during their he had been on a few tours too, and one was like a do-it-yourself type of tour, and they would do the whole like staying with somebody, and like he said quickly they're like, no, we can't do this because they just want to party, and they're like, they're tired, they want to sleep and get to the next show, to the point where they lied and said, we should really hit the road here, and they just got in their van, parked around the corner, and went to sleep. That that is the life on the road. I would be the same way. I'm like, I can't burn the candle at both ends.
No, you totally can't. Your job is way too important to be drinking beer at night or wherever you're, drinking alcohol, and then waking up with a hangover, and you're in a van for 6 hours. It's just like, well, that doesn't feel good. You quickly realize that stuff, is just not conducive to that, kind of lifestyle, on the road. Because, man, essentially what I do is I have a laptop or an iPad, and I'm watching YouTube or Netflix all day long. You know what I mean? Like watching drum videos or something. And then like, it's just like, okay, we're at the gig. Whew, thank goodness.
Right.
Let's have some fun. But yeah, I mean, like,
people have a different misconception of what touring is, what being a musician is.
Yeah.
And it's actually really this.
Yeah.
It's really this. It's just being humble. It's being responsible and serving the song and playing your craft and networking.
Networking
because
is
that
huge.
is it. Like, if you're a jerk, networking isn't going to work out for you. You wouldn't have got those other gigs. Absolutely.
And too is, okay, like let's say you do a tour with an artist or a band or something like that. Well, that tour is going to end, and at the end of that tour, you might not get a call back because that artist might say, "Hey, I want to go a different direction. I want to have a different sound. I'm going to have a completely different band."
Right.
Well, then, like, what about me? I thought I was your guy. So there's a lot of ups and downs that way. But if you try to network, a really great thing is, as drummers, we don't get to hang out with a lot of other drummers on a regular basis. There's rarely ever two drummers or more drummers on a gig. There's always a couple guitar players or a keyboard player, and you have that. But you really never are on many gigs with another drummer. So it's great to network with other drummers, be friends with other drummers, get advice and learn, teach other drummers and stuff like that. But what I've really had success would be if you have a friend or are friends with bass players. Man, bass players are where it's at.
That's
like
it.
If you want to
MVPs.
if you want to put your money on something, get to know your bass player and get to know other bands' bass players, because every good bass player wants to play with a good drummer.
Yeah.
And every good drummer wants to play with a bass player. And when their band is needing a drummer, the first person they ask is going to be the bass player.
Sure.
Hey man, or hey gal, do you know any good drummers? And that bass player is, because that's everything.
Yeah, and you want your name to be mentioned.
Oh, absolutely. I want it to be mentioned first.
Yeah.
All the
Not the kid down the street. Are you still in contact with that kid? Do you know where he is?
I just recently, I didn't ever know the kid very well, but a really close friend of mine is friends with him. And I actually, just about a week ago, saw my buddy, and I said, hey man, do you know so-and-so? Is he still playing drums? Oh yeah, he's actually playing with the guys we grew up with right now. And I'm thinking, good for him, man. Because like,
It's awesome.
If I didn't have that that sense of
lighting the fire under your butt.
yeah, man, I needed that.
Yeah.
I always need that, because I'm not much of a self-propeller.
Yeah.
But it doesn't take much for me to want to be better than the next guy, because it's like I need that. I won't talk about it, but I definitely need that inside me.
Yeah, sometimes you need that little bit of a push.
Yeah.
And you got to turn a negative into a positive.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's what you guys preach all the time.
That's it, man.
Turning
That's
negatives into positive. That's what it's all
is.
about. Yeah, man. Just being friendly, Because when you're on the road, or you're in a studio situation, or any situation, musically or unmusically, like, you don't want to be around a guy that's an a-hole.
Yeah.
You don't want to be around a guy that's a jerk, or that, like, you're in a van for 5 hours a day with these folks.
Right.
The last thing you want is someone to be, not cool.
Yeah.
So even beyond playing, there's a million guys that can and gals that can play well, but can they hang? That's
Right.
a really important thing. You have to be able to hang, and maybe that's where I'm at.
That is it. It kind of goes back to what you were saying earlier, where you're like, he just plays the song.
Yeah.
And sometimes I have to think about that too. If I'm like, man, this guy's got some chops, so I got to break out my chops. I'm like, no.
Yeah.
Because the guys in your band, or like you want to impress them. Like, I just started playing with a new band.
Oh yeah.
And back to what you were saying about starting your day with drums is the best thing you can do.
It's awesome.
Because I'm like, I started waking up. I'm like, I got to learn these songs. I want to, and I can't practice at night really.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I woke up and I felt so good coming in after I'd played, and I'm like, I'm getting these songs. I'm feeling good. Like, it's such a good confidence booster. But then I'm like, it's not about the chops either.
Yeah.
Like, they care about, am I hitting all the right parts really?
Yeah.
Am I stopping and starting, like, am I setting a good groove or good tempo?
That's it.
That's the most important thing.
Yeah. The last thing you want is to be on stage working for an artist, and you see a drummer in the audience or side stage, and you're like, yeah. You give him that look, and then you're just like, and then you want to just play all your little licks.
Yeah.
And then you're feeling cool about it.
Yeah.
Because that other drummer's like, giving you that look.
Yeah.
And then that band leader turns around and gives you like a, what in the world are you thinking?
Yeah.
It puts you back in your place real quick. Because that band leader doesn't hire me to impress that other guy, that one guy in the audience.
Exactly. Yeah.
He
It's
wants
not
me
about that.
to serve him.
That's right.
So that's where I need to be, and that's where I've kind of made my, career so far with artists,
That's it.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well-
in the meantime, you get to have a really cool thing.
Yeah.
You get to do this kind of stuff.
That's it. That's
Yeah.
it, man. Well, I appreciate your perspective. Thanks for sharing and coming and hanging out with us.
It's been an absolute pleasure being here
Dude,
and talking
we're
with
just
you
gonna
guys.
keep doing these. So as
Okay.
often we need to ask people or how often it's okay to have the same guest on because
Right.
we need to just like talk about start your day with drums. Let's all
Yeah.
play drums and then come here before the shop opens and just chat
Yeah.
about drums before we start. It's awesome.
There's a lot more
Great.
I haven't told you about.
Exactly.
Dude,
And
that's what I'm saying.
I
Let's
wanna
cut
hear
it off
about,
here
like,
so
the
we can
next
just do
tour.
like next episode,
You know,
next episode.
we could just do a deep dive of like
Yeah.
this tour or that,
Yeah.
like because we're just scratching the surface.
You tell me what artists you really dig, and I'll tell you my story about them.
See, that's
it.
tough.
That's it.
Just,
Awesome.
I'm sure you have the Levon Helm.
Oh.
We could do a live podcast from the
Dude,
studio.
we could go up there and yeah,
We can make that
and
happen.
document the whole freaking thing.
We could totally
is
do
like
that.
my dream. I would.
I know a lot of good
We could
folks
do
up
that.
there.
Awesome.
Yeah, man. We'll have Levon's grandson. Levon's daughter Amy has a son. His name is Lee, and he's a great drummer. I bet you he's probably 14 or 15 years old.
Okay.
We're buddies on Instagram and stuff. Killer drummer. We'll get him on it too, man, because he's got some
Absolutely.
cool stories.
14-year-old killer drum. I don't want to meet him.
Oh, he's cool, man.
That, dude,
awesome.
He's
that would be
definitely
that would be great. But we got to save some for later.
All right.
We got to save some. So let's put a pin in that. But thank you, anyone who's still with us, listening in on this episode of Drum Key. As always, support your local drum shops. That is so important. If you don't have one, we'll adopt you, of course. We're willing to do that. Take on a couple more drummers. But I believe that's going to be the show. Thanks for joining us.